Do you have to make a gift for someone very fast? I do. Do you have too much scrap wood laying around your shop? So much. Do you love bowls? I really do. Do you not own a lathe but own a table saw? Yep. Well, I've got the thing for you. Introducing the all-new table saw bowl making jig. Stay tuned for details. The first thing I'm going to do is cut out all the individual pieces for this project out of this 3/4 inch plywood material. Now we don't need this entire sheet of plywood. As you can see from my cut list here, it only requires about a 2 foot by 4 foot section of plywood. The rest of this can be saved for future projects. This cut list can be downloaded for free, as well as all my other plans from my website, DIYbuilds.ca. So let's go ahead, get these pieces cut out, and I'll meet you back here once that's done. So you can see I have a long piece of 1/2 inch threaded rod, and I need to cut it down to 8 inches for the vertical piece that holds onto the bowl, and then 2 4-inch pieces for either side for mounting the swivel piece on top. So I'll mark this and cut it. So the last piece to cut out is the cross member that holds the bowl that swivels back and forth, and I call out a 2x4 piece of material. This is a 2x10 piece of material, which I do have. I don't have any 2x4s kicking around. So I'm just going to cut this to length, and then over at the table saw, cut it to the same width as a 2x4, which is 3.5 inches. Actually, one thing I did forget is that I needed some runners for underneath of the jig to keep them locked in the miter slots on the table saw. I just happen to have these strips of oak which perfectly fit into these slots, so I'm just going to cut them down to final length, and these are going to be our runners for underneath. These will be perfect. So in front of me I have all the pieces we need to build this jig. Now we're not quite there yet, as there's a little bit of fitting to do, some holes need to be drilled, and so on. Let's just go through all the parts so far. We have the 2 runners which will go underneath the base plate, and they will lock into the miter slots on the table saw. These 2 pieces will go around the back side and hook onto the rail of the fence to make it more secure. This is going to be a rigidly mounted piece that goes between the 2 uprights to kind of keep some rigidity in there, as well as acting as a stop for this piece to smack up against, so it can't go more than 90 degrees. This is the rotating part, which is going to have a bolt going through it to hold the bowl and to spin, so there'll be 2 bearings mounted in here. And these are our 4 braces, which are going to go along the uprights on either side, just to give a little more rigidity. The next thing I want to work on is these 2 upright pieces, so I'm going to mark out exactly where these R8 2RS bearings are going to go into each side. And to do that, I'm going to be using this 1 1/8" Forstner bit and recessing a hole to make these flush. And this does create a very nice press fit, so these won't go anywhere, especially combined with the bolt and the lock nuts holding everything in place afterwards. So let's head over to the drill press, drill these holes. Next, I want to cut out the circle from the base here, and the reason for this circle is A, to make room for the blade, and B, that circle is going to hold the bowl in place when we flip it upside down. Once we've carved the outside, we want to do the inside of the bowl. We have to flip it upside down. It has to sit inside that circle as we raise the blade, and it spins and carves out the center. So I have marked out right now my distance to the center of the blade here and the center of the jig here, and I've marked a hole. Now I thought about marking a circle here and just using my jigsaw, but I don't think that's going to be precise enough. So I'm going to have to whip together some kind of quick circle cutting jig for my router, and I'll meet you back here and we'll cut this circle out perfectly. So we've got this screwed down at our center point of our radius, and I'm just going to move this around, lowering the bit a 1/4 inch at a time, and that'll have our circle totally cut out. Now that the circle's cut out, I have the base piece clamped up in my linear actuator vise. And we have this piece, which is going to hang over the back side on the bottom. This is the bottom, this is the top. And this is going to be used for referencing against the back of the table saw and make lining up the jig a lot easier. So I'm just going to keep this in place with some brad nails and then fully attach it with a bunch of 2-inch screws. So before I attach this piece to the bottom, which is going to hook around the back side of the fence and lock everything in place, I want to get the miter runners attached to the bottom first. So first I'm going to lay down some spacers here. These are 1/4 inch hardboard, and then these strips are about 1/8 of an inch. It doesn't have to be full depth of the miter gauge. It can be, it's not going to matter. And I'm going to lay this down here with that back edge resting against the fence. Now, I've already measured out the exact center of my circle, which I know is 12 inches. So it's very easy to reference off the side here instead of trying to refine the center of the circle again. And I've already set my fence to that exact position. So that's going to help me when I go to lay these strips down, put the glue, and then place this down. This fence is going to ensure I don't have to think about it at all. Just slap it down, put some weight on it, and let the glue dry. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so these 2 strips are fully glued on and they ain't going anywhere, but I do want to add a couple screws for some insurance. So my little helper here is going to help me drill 4 holes. 1, 2, and go ahead, you gotta squeeze it. Good job. And then we're going to countersink it. So I think I got to do this, I got to push pretty hard. Do you know how to use the screwdriver? Yeah. Okay, you want to try? Let's see. Let me just get it started for you. So we always spin this way, right? And grab it up here. You can use 2 hands and you got to push down when you're spinning. Yeah. So that's the slow way. Do you want to use the drill?
Yeah.
Good job. One thing I've learned, if you're going to let the kids use the drill to drill things in, you got to put the clutch on. Otherwise, they're going right through to China. Perfect, mister.
That was loud.
Good job. You're a great helper. Okay, so the next step is to attach this piece right here, and that's going to hook onto the back side of the fence and really lock in the back end of the whole jig. So now that the back is secured, on the front I want to use these big toggle clamps to keep it tied down to the table. And to stop it from sliding back at all, I want to cut some grooves into the top here that'll allow these to sink a little bit into the top. That way the back here is touching the table saw, and with it being locked into a groove, it can't move at all. And we're getting it totally fixed down to the table, so it's not floating in any way at the front. So I'm just going to mark around these toggle clamps, and then I'll use a Forstner bit to make a hole, and then I'll actually move the hole up about 1 millimeter. That way there's some pullback on it, and it's kind of acting as a spring. So next I want to get these 2 upright pieces permanently mounted to the jig, and to do that I've marked the center of my circle and the center of where this bearing is, and I'll just line them up like this. Now to get my spacing where this needs to go left and right, I figured out with my hard spacer block, which is going to be located at the top, but I'm using it at the bottom to calculate and set my combination square at the appropriate distance here. So I'll just line it up like this, and then attach it with a bunch of screws. Now, in order to make this easier, I'm going to drill 2 pocket holes right here at my homemade pocket hole machine in just a second, and that'll allow me to line everything from the top before coming back, drilling holes on the bottom, and driving a bunch of 2-inch screws from the bottom to totally make this secure. The next thing to do on this swing arm is to drill the recess on the top and bottom for both bearings. So I've got marked my center here as 6 and 11/16. So I'll mark both sides, center punch, drill the Forstner bit on both sides, and then I'll drill a through hole, which is, I don't know, 1/2 inch or even slightly bigger all the way through, just to make room for the spinning bolt inside of the swing arm. So this bolt is going to go through here. This end is going to get attached to the bolt. This end is going to attach to the drill. And because of that, I'm going to head over to the belt grinder and grind a triangular shape into the top of this so the chuck can better grip onto the top of it. That came out pretty nice. The drill should have a good grip on this now. Our next step is to press in these bearings, which shouldn't be too hard. Nice snug fit there. So we can run our bolt through here now. Spins nice and good. So now I'm going to put just our nylock nuts on either side. So that worked great. I just need to shift these down a little bit because this one didn't spin so much and this one did, so I'll just fix that. So now it's time to mount the swing arm to the jig itself. And you see I have clamped on top 2 pieces of wood, and that's just so everything sits flush along this top edge. Now to align everything left and right, I have marked here exactly where this needs to sit on both sides, because I used a square earlier and just made sure everything aligned. Then I'm going to clamp everything in place so nothing moves around on us. And then I'm going to use this 13/32 brad point bit and drill all the way straight into that 2x4 to make room for our bolt. The reason it's 13/32 is it's just undersized enough that the threads are sticking out and going to have enough bite force into the 2x4. Then we'll come back, enlarge this hole, insert our bearing, and then we'll drive our bolts into the 2x4 and then put our lock nut on the outside, and everything will be nice and secure. So you see I just ran my 1/2-inch tap in both sides here, only a little bit of the way. I want it to really grab once it gets further in, so we won't tap the whole hole. So now I'm installing the nylock nuts onto the end of these bolts. So I'm just grabbing them. It doesn't really matter if I mess up the threads too bad, and I'm just going to tighten them on here. Now in order to install these, you need to put a jam nut on the end, otherwise the nylock is going to spin all the way down once this really starts to grab into the 2x4, and that's no bueno. So just put a jam nut on the end, take it off when you're done. So I've got both bolts here, just put the washers in, and now we're going to slide this guy in here. You really don't want this too loose. You want a bit of friction in there. And now you ask yourself, well, why did he use bearings? Well, because I needed 2 here and it came in a pack of 10, so whatever. Now we're ready for the last few finishing touches. I'm going to go ahead and install these cross braces, all 4 of them, 2 on this side, 2 on the other, with just some glue and brad nails into each end, and let that set overnight. Then I'm going to be installing this cross beam right here. This really strengthens up the top, but it also acts as a stop. So when this piece pivots, it can only go this far, 90 degrees, or this far, 90 degrees. I didn't want it being able to go this direction. We're always going to be working backwards with it. So this will get installed with just a few screws, or 1 screw in each end, and that's it. Okay, so what I've got here is a big old chunk of wood. I spared you guys the experience of me cutting everything up and gluing it all together. This is basically just a bunch of pallet wood. There's some maple on the bottom and some oak on the top. I figured it would be nice to have the oak as a rim on the bowl, so that's what I did. Anyways, so now I've got to mark the center of my bowl, and I'm just going to go like this, across, and that's roughly the center. Next, I will make a center punch hole, and then I'm going to put my pencil in the end, and I'm just going to draw my circle. This is my makeshift protractor. It's just spaced at 5.5 inches between these 2 circles. And the reason for that is the blank I need for carving out the bowl on this jig is an 11-inch diameter circle that's 3.5 inches thick. And that's going to be the same for all the bowls I need. What I'm going to do is go over to the bandsaw and just cut out this exact circle. Then from there, over at the drill press, I'm going to drill my 3/8 inch hole down 2.5 inches, and that will allow us to mount it up onto the jig. And from there, it's turning this into a bowl. So as it turns out, my drill press is a little bit too small, so I've just drilled a hole in this block with the drill press so I know it's perfectly perpendicular to the surface. So I'll go ahead and drill this hole. Okay, let's just lower the blade real quick. That worked remarkably well. I mean, there is this chip out and fuzzy stuff on top. That might just be because it's red oak. That might be because it's end grain and that was gonna happen on any species of wood, I'm not sure. But it's nothing a little bit of sanding is not gonna clean up before we flip it over and do the other side. So let's spin this like this and get it taken off. Okay, see it's still got the flat bottom there, so it can actually be a bowl when it's done. So let's get this top bit cleaned up. This actually turned out super well. I'm pretty impressed. It is a bit rough though, so I'm gonna go ahead and use my random orbit sander as I'm spinning this just to smooth the outside, work my way through the grits. Wow, that came out really nice. This thing is wicked smooth and even has a bit of a shine to it. So I'm gonna take this off and I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna be mounting this upside down to carve out the inside. I'm gonna take the bowl, I'm gonna slide it inside of the circle here. I'm going to use this piece, which I've drilled an appropriate sized hole to be threaded onto this shaft. And this piece is going to get hot glued onto the bottom of the bowl as a temporary connection. That way it couples the drill to the bottom of the bowl. And during the hot gluing, I'm going to be spinning it slowly as this auto centers itself and grips onto the bowl. That's the theory at least. Now in order to do that, there's not really any clearance here, so I'm just going to lift up the clamps in the front and lift up the jig and slide the sucker on first. Remember that time I forgot to trim away the extra runners that go in the miter slots? Well, that's now holding the bowl, so give me a second and I'll remove those guys and this will work for us. Okay, the runners are out of the way, so let's plop the bowl down in here. And now we'll tilt this over, attach our drill again, and we'll just lift this up so it can fit over. Now let's get some hot glue in there and spin her up. You know that feeling when your plan doesn't work? Okay, so I think we're good now. So what I ended up doing was putting more hot glue underneath of it, again leaving the front clamps off, and just spinning this by hand really slowly, and this part right here, just trying to get it centered, and it just kind of auto-centered itself, and after a few seconds, 10 seconds or so, this was solid enough of a connection to where now we can spin it from up here. So let's get our drill attached, turn the dust collection on, start raising the blade as we spin this, and that'll carve out the inside for us. Okay, that should be it. Other than a little bit of sanding on the inside, this should be a bowl. Let's check it out. Well guys, I don't think that came out half bad, especially the outside where I was able to sand it. This inside though, I think this is just going to be left up to hand sanding, which is a bit unfortunate, but that's the price you pay for making a bowl on your table saw. Anyways, let's get this sanded up, put a little finish on it, and see how it looks. Oh yeah, we got to get this guy off too. I'm going to try just drilling this straight in and see if it pops off. If not, we're going to have to chisel it. Nope, we're going to have to chisel that guy off. Oh well. So in order to take care of this, I decided to do what any rational person with a CNC would do and just freehand it. Let's see how this goes. So you can see I got the glue off the bottom. So the next thing I'm going to do is try to put a 1/4 inch roundover on the outside of the bowl. And it's not going to ride up against the bearing, it's going to ride up against these 2 points in the fence. Because if it was to hit the bearing, it would be kind of a over roundover. Like because of this angle, it would dig in too much. So we're going to see how this goes. Hopefully it's good. Well guys, there it is. After a marathon of sanding, she is finished. For being made out of some scrap pallet wood, maple, and red oak, I think it turned out pretty nice. So now I'm just going to put on some mineral oil to finish it, and this project's complete.
Don't act like you're not impressed.